My name is Robert Mitchell, and I've spent 43 years serving my country in ways most people will never know about. When you work in the shadows for as long as I have, you develop instincts, a sixth sense for when something isn't quite right. That instinct saved my life more times than I can count in Belgrade, in Kabul, in places whose names I still can't speak aloud. But I never thought I'd need it in my own home, sitting across the dinner table from my own family. It was a Tuesday evening in late September when I first felt that familiar prickle at the base of my neck. My daughter Sarah had invited me over for dinner, as she did every week. The autumn air was crisp, and the smell of her pot roast filled the house, the same recipe her mother used to make before cancer took her 5 years ago. I was playing with my granddaughter Emma in the living room, teaching her how to fold an origami crane, when I noticed him watching us. Marcus. My son-in-law of 3 years. He stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, his phone in his hand, pointed in our direction. At first I thought nothing of it. Everyone takes photos of their kids these days. But there was something in his expression, something calculated and cold, that didn't match the warmth of the moment. "Getting some good shots?" I called out, smiling. He flinched, actually flinched, and lowered the phone quickly. "Yeah, just capturing memories," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "That was the first puzzle piece, though I didn't know it yet. I'm 71 years old now, retired from the agency for 6 years, but some habits never die. I noticed Marcus had been asking a lot of questions lately. Innocent questions, or so they seemed. How much was my house worth? Did I have a will? What were my plans for my assets? He framed them as concern. After all, I was getting older, and didn't I want to make sure everything was in order for Sarah and Emma? My house in McLean, Virginia, sits on 2 acres of prime real estate. I bought it in 1987 for a fraction of what it's worth now. The car in my garage is a 1967 Shelby GT 500, pristine condition, worth close to $250,000. I'm not a rich man by the standards of my former colleagues who went into the private sector, but I'm comfortable. Very comfortable. Marcus worked in commercial real estate, and business hadn't been good for him lately. I knew this because Sarah had mentioned it, worry creasing her forehead. They'd made some bad investments, she said. They'd stretched themselves thin on a property in Arlington that wasn't moving. She didn't say how much they were underwater, but I could read between the lines. 2 weeks after that dinner, I was at the grocery store when I saw Marcus's car parked outside a law office. Benning and Associates, I knew them. They specialized in elder law, guardianships, and estate planning. I filed that information away. The following Sunday, Sarah called to cancel our weekly dinner. Marcus wasn't feeling well, she said, and her voice sounded strained. When I offered to bring soup, she quickly declined. Too quickly. That's when I started paying closer attention. I began doing what I do best, conducting surveillance. Not on foreign operatives or terrorist cells this time, but on my own son-in-law. It felt wrong, invasive, but that instinct wouldn't let me rest. Something was happening, something that involved me, and I needed to know what. I started with the basics. I drove past their house at different times, noting patterns. Marcus left for work at 7:30 each morning, but twice that week he returned home at 10, stayed for an hour, then left again. On one of those occasions I saw another car in the driveway, a silver Lexus. I ran the plates to a contact I still had at the DMV. The car belonged to a woman named Patricia Hendricks. Another search revealed she was a lawyer at Benning and Associates. My stomach nodded. Why was Marcus meeting with an elder law attorney at his house when Sarah was at work? I called Sarah that afternoon, casually asking how Marcus was feeling. "Oh, he's fine now," she said too brightly. "Just a stomach bug." She was lying to me. My own daughter was lying to me, which meant she either didn't know what Marcus was doing, or she was protecting him. I needed more information. I've never been one to use my connections lightly. The network of people who owe me favors is a resource I've guarded carefully over the decades. But this was my family. I made a call to Tom Brennan, a man who now worked in the FBI's white-collar crime division. We'd run operations together in the 90s, and I'd once pulled him out of a very bad situation in Moscow. Tom, I need a favor. Nothing official, just information. For you, Rob? Anything. What do you need? I gave him Marcus's name and social security number. I want to know if he's in any financial trouble. Debts, liens, anything unusual. Tom called me back the next day. Your son-in-law is in deep, Rob. He owes about $400,000 on bad property investments. Credit cards maxed out. He's been borrowing against his and Sarah's home. They're about 3 months from foreclosure if he doesn't come up with cash. $400,000. My chest tightened. That was more than not good. That was desperate. There's something else, Tom continued. He's been researching Adult Protective Services complaints. Multiple searches on his work computer about elder abuse reporting procedures, what evidence is needed, how investigations work. The room seemed to tilt. When? Started about 6 weeks ago. Intensified in the last 2 weeks. I thanked Tom and ended the call, my mind racing. Marcus wasn't just in financial trouble, he was planning something. And it involved me. I spent the next week following him more carefully. I watched him meet with Patricia Hendricks twice more, once at a coffee shop in Arlington, once at the law office. I couldn't hear their conversations, but I could read body language. Marcus was agitated, animated. Patricia was calm, professional, taking notes. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I saw him meet with someone else, a man I didn't recognize at first. They met in a park in Falls Church, sitting on a bench for 20 minutes. The man handed Marcus what looked like documents in a manila envelope. After Marcus left, I approached the bench, pretending to tie my shoe, and found a business card that had fallen between the slats. Detective Raymond Walsh, Child Protective Services, Fairfax County. My blood ran cold. Child Protective Services. He was meeting with CPS. The pieces were coming together now, forming a picture so ugly I didn't want to believe it. But I'd seen too much in my career to ignore evidence. That night, I broke into Marcus's home office. I still know how to pick a lock, how to move through a house without leaving traces. Sarah and Marcus were at a school event with Emma. I'd confirmed their attendance before entering. What I found in his desk drawer confirmed my worst fears. There were notes, written in Marcus's handwriting. A timeline. September 15th. Established pattern of inappropriate behavior with Emma. September 22nd. Document rough handling. September 29th. Capture video evidence of concerning interactions. There were printed articles about elder abuse, about how to report it, about guardianship proceedings. And there was a draft complaint, addressed to Adult Protective Services and CPS, detailing allegations that made my stomach turn. According to Marcus's fiction, I was cruel to Emma. I grabbed her roughly. I yelled at her. I made her cry. I was showing signs of dementia and violent tendencies. I was a danger to the child. And because I lived alone in a house worth over $1 million, with assets and no living spouse, I needed a guardian to protect me from myself. The guardian he proposed in his notes was Sarah, his wife. And if Sarah became my guardian, she would control my assets. She could sell my house, sell my car, make all my financial decisions. And Marcus, drowning in debt, would have access to everything. But here's what Marcus didn't understand. I wasn't some isolated old man with no one to turn to. I'd spent 4 decades building relationships with people at every level of the intelligence community, law enforcement, and government. I'd saved lives, protected secrets, and earned loyalty that ran bone deep. It was time to make some calls. I photographed every document in Marcus's desk and left everything exactly as I'd found it. Back home, I sat in my study until 3 a.m, planning my response. This wasn't just about protecting myself, it was about protecting Sarah and Emma. My daughter had married a man capable of using his own child as a pawn in a scheme to steal from her father. She needed to know, but more than that, I needed to make sure Marcus could never hurt this family again. The next morning, I called an old friend, Director Jameson, who now headed the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division. We'd worked together on a counterintelligence operation in 2003 that prevented a significant security breach. He told me once that he owed me a debt he could never repay. "Paul, I need your help with something personal," I said. 20 minutes later, I'd explained everything. Paul was quiet for a long moment. "This is serious, Rob. Filing false CPS and APS reports is a crime. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse for financial gain. We're talking federal charges if this crosses state lines, which I'm guessing it will when he tries to move your assets. I want him caught in the act," I said. "I want it so airtight that he can't talk his way out. But I also want my daughter protected." "She doesn't know about any of this." "Are you sure?" "Sometimes spouses." "I'm sure. I know my daughter. She would never go along with this." Paul agreed to help. What I was asking for was unusual, to let a criminal conspiracy continue until we had irrefutable evidence. But the Bureau owed me, and Paul knew it. Over the next week, I continued my routine as if nothing was wrong. I went to dinner at Sarah's house. I played with Emma. I let Marcus take his videos and notes. But now I was wired, with FBI surveillance teams documenting everything. When Marcus recorded me, roughly, lifting Emma to help her reach a book on a high shelf, the FBI recorded him manipulating the angle to make it look aggressive. When he filmed me, yelling at Emma, the FBI's audio captured me actually helping her with homework, my voice raised only because she was in the other room. Marcus was building a false case, and we were building a real one. The trap was set for October 15th. I'd been tipped off through my FBI contacts that Marcus had filed his complaint with CPS and APS. A caseworker would visit me the following day. Detective Walsh would interview me about the allegations regarding Emma. Everything was in motion. But Marcus didn't know that I'd already met with Special Agent Carol Simmons, the FBI agent assigned to the case. We'd coordinated every detail. When CPS came to investigate, they'd find an elderly man with full cognitive function, a loving grandfather, and no evidence of abuse. But they'd also find an ongoing federal investigation into the person who'd made the allegations. The morning of October 15th, I received the call I'd been expecting. "Mr. Mitchell? This is Jennifer Torres from Adult Protective Services. We've received a complaint regarding your welfare and your interactions with your granddaughter. I need to schedule a home visit." "Of course," I said calmly. "I'm available this afternoon." Marcus had taken the day off work. I knew because I'd been tracking his movements. He was at home, probably expecting to hear news about the investigation into me, already planning how he'd convince Sarah that her father needed help, that they needed to step in, that the house would have to be sold for my own good. He had no idea what was coming. At 2 p.m., Jennifer Torres arrived at my home, accompanied by Detective Walsh and 2 uniformed Fairfax County police officers. But they weren't alone. Also present were Special Agent Carol Simmons and Special Agent David Park from the FBI, though they waited in an unmarked car at the end of my driveway. I welcomed them into my home, offered coffee, and sat down in my living room as if this were a perfectly normal social visit. Jennifer was professional but thorough. She asked about my daily routine, my relationship with Emma, my physical and mental health. Detective Walsh asked about specific incidents, the dates Marcus had provided, the allegations of rough handling and verbal abuse. I answered every question honestly. Then I said something they weren't expecting. "I appreciate you following up on this complaint. I understand you have to take every report seriously. However, I need to inform you that the person who filed this complaint is currently under federal investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud and filing false reports with a government agency." Jennifer's eyes widened. Detective Walsh's hand moved to his notepad. "I've spent the last 3 weeks documenting my son-in-law's scheme to fabricate elder abuse allegations in order to gain control of my assets. I have photographs of documents from his home office detailing his plan." I have FBI surveillance footage of him manipulating situations to create false evidence. And I have financial records showing a clear motive. He's in debt for over $400,000. I handed them a folder containing copies of everything: Marcus's notes, the financial records Tom had provided, stills from the FBI surveillance footage, all properly annotated and dated. "If you'll excuse me for a moment," Detective Walsh said, stepping outside to make a phone call. 5 minutes later, Special Agents Simmons and Park entered my home. "Mr. Mitchell has been cooperating with our investigation," Agent Simmons explained to the CPS workers. "We've been documenting Marcus Brenner's activities for the past 2 weeks. What started as a potential elder abuse case has evolved into a federal investigation involving fraud, conspiracy, and filing false reports with multiple government agencies." Jennifer looked shaken. "Are you telling me that all these allegations are fabricated?" I confirmed. "My son-in-law is attempting to steal my home and assets by having my daughter declared my guardian. He's been using my granddaughter as a prop, staging situations to make me look abusive or mentally incompetent. We have everything we need to arrest him," Agent Park added. "We were waiting to see if he'd escalate to an actual court filing for guardianship, but Mr. Mitchell felt it was time to intervene." "We agree." Detective Walsh returned, his expression grave. "I've spoken with my supervisor. If these allegations are false, Mr. Brenner is looking at charges in Fairfax County as well. Filing a false police report involving child abuse is a felony in Virginia. We're going to pick him up now," Agent Simmons said. "Mr. Mitchell, I want to thank you for your patience in letting this play out. We have enough evidence to put him away for several years." But I held up my hand. "There's one more thing we need to do first. My daughter doesn't know about any of this. I need to tell her before you arrest him. She deserves to hear it from me." The agents exchanged glances. "We can give you 2 hours," Agent Simmons said. "But that's it. We can't risk him destroying evidence or fleeing." I called Sarah and asked her to come to my house immediately. It was important, I said. Family emergency. She arrived 30 minutes later, Emma in tow, worry etched on her face. Marcus had stayed home, exactly as I'd expected. Emma ran to me, and I scooped her up, holding her tight. Sarah took in the scene: the federal agents, the CPS workers, the police officers. "Dad, what's going on? Are you okay?" I asked one of the officers to take Emma to my study, where I had coloring books and toys. Once she was out of earshot, I sat Sarah down and told her everything. I showed her the evidence, the documents, the surveillance footage. I watched my daughter's face cycle through disbelief, horror, anger, and finally heartbreak. "He was going to use Emma," she whispered. "He was going to use our daughter to steal from you. He was desperate," I said quietly. "Desperate people do terrible things. But Sarah, I need you to understand, you're not responsible for his choices. You didn't know." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I believed him when he said you were getting forgetful. When he said you'd been rough with Emma. I started to doubt you, Dad. My own father, and I started to doubt you. He's a skilled manipulator." Agent Simmons interjected gently. "This is what con artists do. They isolate their victims, make them doubt reality. You were a victim here too, Mrs. Brenner." Sarah looked up at me, her eyes red. "What happens now?" "Now, these agents are going to arrest Marcus. He'll be charged with multiple felonies. You'll need to decide what you want to do about your marriage, about Emma, about everything. But whatever you decide, Emma and I are here. You're not alone." "I want him arrested," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "I want him prosecuted for everything he tried to do." Agent Simmons nodded. "We'll need your testimony. And we'll need you to stay away from the house for a few hours while we execute the arrest warrant and search the premises." Sarah and Emma stayed with me while the FBI descended on her home. Marcus was arrested at 4:30 that afternoon. The search of his office uncovered even more evidence: communications with the attorney about guardianship proceedings, research into how to have someone declared incompetent, and most damning, a spreadsheet titled Asset Liquidation Plan that detailed exactly how he intended to sell my house and car and where the money would go. The arrest of Marcus Brenner made the local news, though the details were kept vague. "Arlington man arrested on federal fraud charges," read the headline. What they didn't report was the full scope of his scheme or the fact that he tried to weaponize Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services against his own family. Marcus's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had surveillance footage, documents in his own handwriting, testimony from the attorney he'd consulted, and most damaging of all, the false reports themselves. The judge denied bail, citing Marcus as a flight risk given the severity of the charges and the financial motive. The trial took place 4 months later. I testified, as did Sarah. The FBI agents testified about the investigation. Marcus's financial records were entered into evidence, showing the desperate spiral of debt he'd fallen into. His attorney argued that he'd never actually gone through with the guardianship filing, that he'd backed out at the last minute, that it was all just fantasy planning. But the prosecutor demolished that defense. The defendant filed false reports with Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services, she argued. He initiated investigations into an innocent man. He used his own daughter as an unwitting accomplice. He manipulated his child to create false evidence. The only reason he didn't file for guardianship was because he was arrested before he could. The investigation, the damage, the trauma, that was all real. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, attempted elder abuse for financial gain, and because his communications with the attorney had crossed state lines, wire fraud. At sentencing, the judge was stern. "Mr. Brenner, you attempted to exploit systems designed to protect the vulnerable, children, and the elderly. You tried to weaponize these systems against your own family for financial gain. You showed no remorse, only regret at being caught. The court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release." Sarah filed for divorce before the trial even ended. She and Emma moved in with me temporarily while she got back on her feet. The house Marcus had put in jeopardy was foreclosed on, but Sarah had already moved on. She started over, found a good job, and slowly rebuilt her life. As for me, I returned to my quiet retirement. The experience had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. I'd faced down terrorists and foreign agents without flinching, but having my own son-in-law try to destroy me had cut deeper than any enemy ever could. But it also reminded me why I'd spent my career doing what I did, to protect people. To stand between good people and those who would hurt them. I'd retired from the agency, but that instinct, that calling, would never leave me. It's been 2 years since Marcus was sentenced. Emma is 9 now, happy and well-adjusted. She asks about her father sometimes, and Sarah tells her the truth in age-appropriate ways, that Daddy made very bad choices and has to face consequences for those choices. Emma doesn't remember much about that period, thankfully. Children are resilient. Sarah has met someone new, a teacher named David who treats her with respect and kindness. They're taking things slowly, and I approve. Emma adores him. Life has a way of working itself out if you give it time. I still think about Marcus sometimes, about what drove him to such desperate measures. Greed, certainly. Entitlement. But also a fundamental misunderstanding about who I was. He saw an elderly man, someone vulnerable and isolated. He never bothered to really know me, never asked about my past beyond the vague. I worked for the government. Explanation I give most people. He didn't know about the network of people who owed me favors, who would move heaven and earth if I asked. He didn't know that I'd spent decades learning how to read people, how to gather intelligence, how to build airtight cases. He didn't know that the mild-mannered grandfather who taught Emma origami had once orchestrated operations that made international headlines, though my name never appeared in any of them. Marcus made a critical error that I'd seen countless times in my career. He underestimated his opponent. He saw what he wanted to see, believed what he wanted to believe, and assumed that his plan was foolproof because he was smarter than everyone else. In my line of work, we had a saying: "The moment you think you're the smartest person in the room is the moment you've already lost." Marcus lost the moment he decided to come after my family. He just didn't know it yet. I've learned lessons too, though. I've learned that retirement doesn't mean letting your guard down. That family, even family by marriage, can harbor the darkest intentions. That the systems we trust to protect us can be weaponized by those with bad intentions. And most importantly, that protecting the people you love sometimes means being willing to use every resource at your disposal, no matter how uncomfortable it might feel. Some people have called what I did revenge. I suppose in a way it was. But I prefer to think of it as justice. Marcus made choices, and those choices had consequences. I simply made sure those consequences caught up with him before he could hurt anyone else. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't caught on to his scheme. Would he have succeeded? Would I have ended up declared incompetent, stripped of my autonomy, my house sold, my life's work reduced to numbers in a bank account that Marcus controlled? Would Sarah have eventually figured out what he'd done, or would she have gone to her grave believing her father had truly lost his mind? These thoughts haunt me sometimes. But then Emma runs into my study, demanding I teach her a new origami design or help her with a science project, and I remember what matters. I protected my family. I used the skills and connections I'd built over a lifetime to save them from someone who saw them only as means to an end. That's what I did for my country for 43 years, and that's what I did for my family when it mattered most. People sometimes ask me if I regret how hard I came down on Marcus, if 8 years in prison was too harsh for someone who, technically, didn't complete his scheme. My answer is always the same: Marcus didn't stop because he had a crisis of conscience. He stopped because he was caught. Given the chance, he would have followed through. He would have taken everything from me and thought himself clever for doing it. More than that, he was willing to traumatize his own daughter, to make her question her memories and her relationship with her grandfather, all for money. That kind of callousness doesn't deserve mercy. So no, I don't regret it. Not for a second. As I write this, I'm sitting in my study, looking at a photograph on my desk. It's from Emma's 9th birthday party last month. Sarah is smiling, really smiling, the way she used to before Marcus. Emma is laughing, her face covered in chocolate cake. And I'm there too, arms around both of them, protecting them the only way I know how. By being present. By being vigilant. By never forgetting that the most important mission of my life isn't classified, isn't dangerous, and doesn't involve foreign threats. It's right here, in this house, in these two people who mean more to me than anything else in the world. Marcus is in a federal prison in Pennsylvania. He'll be eligible for parole in 6 years if he behaves himself. I've made it clear through appropriate channels that if he ever tries to contact Sarah or Emma, if he ever comes near my family again, the full weight of my connections will fall on him in ways that will make his current predicament seem comfortable. I don't make threats lightly, and I don't make them often. But when it comes to my family, there are no limits to how far I'll go to keep them safe. Some might call that excessive. I call it love. In my 43 years with the agency, I learned that the world is full of people who will take everything from you if given the chance. I learned that evil often wears familiar faces, speaks with friendly voices, and sits at your dinner table. I learned that vigilance isn't paranoia, it's survival. But I also learned something else, something I'd forgotten in the years since my wife died. I learned that the most valuable thing you can protect isn't national security or classified information. It's the people who depend on you. The people who trust you. The people who love you. Marcus thought he was playing a game against an old man who'd lost his edge. What he didn't realize was that I never lost my edge. I just pointed it in a different direction. Toward family. Toward protection. Toward the quiet, unglamorous work of being a grandfather who shows up, pays attention, and never stops watching for threats. That's my mission now. Not for my country, though I'd serve again if called. Not for glory or recognition, but for Sarah and Emma, for the chance to watch my granddaughter grow up safe and happy, for the opportunity to see my daughter smile without the weight of a toxic marriage crushing her spirit. That's worth more than any successful operation, any medal, any commendation. That's worth everything. And if anyone ever threatens my family again, they'll learn what Marcus learned, that retirement doesn't mean I've forgotten how to fight. It just means I'm more selective about who I fight for. And there's nothing I won't do to protect the people I love. That's not revenge. That's not vigilantism. That's not even justice, not really. That's simply a promise. A promise I made to my wife before she died, a promise I made to Sarah when she was born, a promise I made to Emma the first time I held her. I will keep you safe. No matter what it takes. No matter who stands in my way. No matter how long I have to wait to see justice done. That's the promise of a grandfather, a father, and a man who spent his life learning how to keep his promises. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way. I hope for everyone's sake that no one else ever has to learn it at all.